All right, hey.
We're live. Are we live?
Now we're live. Now we're live. Looking good, Josh.
Hello, I'm the Love Doctor, here with the Love Nurse. And welcome to Dat Chat. Just kidding, I'm Josh Katzenstein, this is Luke Johnson. We are here to address all of your Saints off-season concerns. My apologies for not being ready. I was firing off a text that was not nearly as important as what we're doing. But if you have any questions, feel free to submit them on Facebook, and we will try to answer as many of them as possible, as long as they're not repeats. And first of all, a happy Valentine's Day to everyone. I don't normally wear these, but I figured, it was...
You're lying. Josh wears these every day. These are not special Valentine's Day glasses. These are... basically, they put him in a comfort mode when he's interviewing professional athletes. And okay, now we're off the rails.
I love love, so that's where we're at. But Luke, before all the questions get going, I think one thing that we should address is the Saints' need for defensive tackle. I know everyone wants to talk about tight ends or receivers or whatever else, but I think defensive tackle has suddenly become one of their top needs this offseason. And they actually thought it was a little bit of a need last year when they, went out and pursued Ndamukong Suh a little bit before he ultimately signed with the Rams. But all of a sudden, with Sheldon Rankins tearing his Achilles in the postseason, that really puts his timeline up in the air. It would seem to me it's unlikely that he'll be ready for week one. And even if he is ready for week one, he's probably not going to be 100%.
Right.
And then David Onyemata got arrested for basically ordering pot in the mail to his house, which, if I know the NFL, is likely to result in a suspension. So then those are their top two guys. Tyler Davison is a free agent, and then every other defensive tackle they have is basically on like a futures deal and totally unproven guys. So
right.
Do you think that they need to address that more so than tight end? Have you really broken it down?
This week we did the position series on NOLA.com. I did a lot of focus on the offense. I think tight end is something where we saw this year they didn't get the production they wanted. Ben Watson kind of led that group. I think he had 35 catches for 400 yards, but not really what they needed there, I think, considering they had the kind of lack of secondary option besides Michael Thomas or Alvin Kamara in the passing game. So I think that's still a position they have to address, but when you're looking at the limited resources they have to work on their roster this year with the small amount of cap space they currently have, the limited draft picks, they have one pick in the first 4 rounds, they got to be smart with where they add to their roster. And if you're looking at a weak point right now, I think defensive tackle is arguably the weakest one. So that would be, in my opinion, one of the first things they have to address.
Yeah, so Luke is breaking down, a position evaluation from the 2018 season. We started with the offense. So today on NOLA.com, you will see the offensive line breakdown. It looks at the past season and, also looks ahead to 2019. Next week, I'll be running the defensive version of those. You can check those out as they come out. But certainly, defensive tackle, the Saints got really good defensive tackle play last year. Sheldon Rankins was one of the best in the league.
Yep.
David Onyemata took a step forward. I thought, Davison was basically the same guy he's been, but, he stayed healthier than, he had in previous years.
And on top of that, they had one of the best run defenses in the league, and I think Davison played a big part.
Absolutely, for sure. And so you would think, the Saints basically have like 20 of their top 22 players coming back. The only ones that are really up in the air are Mark Ingram and Alex Okafor, whose contract voided because of some language in his contract. But I would think that, he's not going to have an incredibly high market value. So I think that, he wants to be back, and I imagine the Saints will want him back. But at the same time, they do have Marcus Davenport sort of waiting in the wings, so they're going to have to decide what to do there. For our first question, Everett Chad Gainier Sr., sorry if I pronounced that wrong, as always, says, Gerald McCoy will be perfect. Jesse James would be a great tight end for the Saints. I agree Gerald McCoy would be perfect, but I feel like Luke, this is your first year covering the team, but I feel like I have this discussion every year, and that everyone's always like, this free agent would be great. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, he would, but the Saints don't have that much cap space. And even though Mickey Loomis is a magician with a salary cap, there are still other teams that have more space, and they can use the same tricks to pursue these guys.
Right, yeah. I mean, especially somebody like Gerald McCoy, who still has, Gerald McCoy will be able to sign for a number of years, right? Yeah. And he'll be able to sign for a lot of money. I think if you're looking at ways to improve this team with your limited resources, it'd make more sense to look at somebody. I know it's not defensive tackle, but like somebody like Terrell Suggs, who you can get him for probably less money for obviously less years, right? And somebody who's going to be looking at a chance to win a championship in the tail end of his career. I think that makes more like. Obviously, we're not talking about defensive tackles here, but I think that's more in the line of what I would expect the Saints to look at in terms of help for this year because the resources are so low. Jesse James, though, I think is a really intriguing one. I think he looked really good with the Steelers. He's big, athletic. He can give some help in the passing game where they could put him on the field with Josh Hill at the same time. I think that's an intriguing one. But again, you're talking about how much resources can you invest into this position there?
Yeah. I don't know about Jesse James. I think Jesse James is like a clone of Josh Hill. He occasionally shows up in the passing game. He's a good blocker. But at the same time, I mean, they might need a guy like that just because they have such limited options at tight end. I mean, Ben Watson's retiring. Human's a free agent, and it seems, unlikely that he'll play again just because of his concussion issues. Garrett Griffin, has showed a little promise. Dan Arnold has shown a little promise. But, it comes back to, what we're talking about. I mean, the Saints just have such limited resources that, they could sign Jesse James to like a 2-year deal, have it all backloaded. I mean, that's what we're going to see with any free agent they sign. It's all going to be backloaded. But at the same time, they have to decide how much they can afford to do that, knowing that Michael Thomas is going to have a big deal coming up. Alvin Kamara is going to have a big deal coming up, and then in a couple of years, Marshawn Lattimore and Ryan Ramczyk are going to have big deals.
Cam Jordan, I think his deal expires at the end of the 2020 season.
And then if Sheldon Rankins, if they have to pick up his 5th-year option and then sign him, I mean, that's one thing that this injury really clouds is Sheldon Rankins' future, because you would have thought, picking up his 5th-year option was an automatic thing, but the Saints have to do that by May, and they're going to have to find a way to figure out just how good he's going to be after this injury. But the Suggs thing I had never even considered. I mean, it's like crazy to me to think that he could ever be wearing a different jersey, but certainly they do need more pass rush, whether it's coming from the interior or the edge.
Right. And especially, if you could get him, I mean, we see it all the time with, these veterans at the later stages of the career, guys who can still play. I think Suggs had like 8 sacks last year. If they can get into a position where they're on a winning team, they have a good chance at making the Super Bowl, I think you could sign these guys for a very affordable deal, and they can play a big role on your team.
I know Cam Jordan would love that. Both Cam and Terrell Suggs are from Chandler, Arizona, although Terrell Suggs transferred from Chandler High, which is where Cam Jordan went. But Cam doesn't like to talk about that. James Richard asks 2 questions. Now that the season is over, can you tell me what in the hell we were doing drafting Rick Leonard? Yes, but before that, your second question, can y'all help Onyemata find a local source for weed? I can't personally, but I do know that if you go to...
It's illegal, James.
It is. But if you go to any concert, I'm sure you'll smell it, and I'm sure you or David could probably find it. It's probably not that hard.
Alicia Keys concert, Michael Scott.
Everyone watches The Office, right? We all watch The Office. We all know what Luke's talking about. Clove cigarette, no big deal. Rick Leonard, though, maybe someone was smoking when they drafted Rick Leonard. I don't know. That was obviously a bad pick, but at the same time, I mean, you just have to sort of think about the logic behind it. I mean, if you're going to just sort of throw darts on the 3rd day of the draft, a good place to do it is on the offensive line at offensive tackle, because that is a premium position. And if you feel strongly about your evaluation, it's a good time to take a chance on a developmental player. Obviously, it didn't work out. I mean, we saw right away that Rick Leonard really did not have the skills. He did not belong. But he's latched on briefly with a couple other teams. We'll see if he ever develops. But certainly, I think that people are right to be upset that pick failed. But at the same time, you have to realize most day 3 picks do not ever pan out. So it's really not the end of the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hit or miss. I mean, they missed badly on that one. He was. The fact that your 4th round pick doesn't make your 53, I think, is bad. That doesn't happen very often. Even if you think you miss on a 4th rounder, the guy not making the team is
right.
Rare. But I think there's still a high variance with those kind of guys at that draft position where sometimes they pan out and sometimes they don't. It's just that it was clear immediately that wasn't going to pan out.
Right. Steve Illich wants to know where we're from. Luke, you want to lead this off?
I'm from Wisconsin, a small town in Wisconsin, but I've been living down here for the last 10 years, married a New Orleans girl, so I basically consider myself a Louisianan now.
So I was born here and lived in Mandeville until I was almost 8 years old, but then I moved to Minneapolis, a suburb called Maple Grove in Minnesota. And then I moved back here 3 years ago. So, Steve, thank you for the question.
Yeah, and because of this, we're both the beat experts on beer. So,
yes, because no offense to all of the local breweries, but the Midwest produces much better beer than the South. Although I will give a shout out to NOLA Brewing, which is right by my house in the Irish Channel, and I think they make some fantastic IPAs and some sours, and I don't even like sours very much.
Oh, come on.
I'm not a big sour guy. At that point, I'd rather just drink wine, but, that's neither here nor there. Stephen Morrow suggests, sign Davison and Okafor. Okafor can play inside and outside. Sign Jordan Phillips or Christian Covington. Draft a defensive end or defensive tackle. Stephen, I like the idea, certainly, and I do think that that is definitely a possibility that, if they bring Okafor back, that he would play inside a little bit, because he did a little bit of that in the postseason after Rankins went down. But still, I mean, that's not getting you the impact that you need. I mean, you need one more impact player along that defensive line if Rankins, is not ready for the start of the year. But at the same time, I don't know who you can draft in the 2nd round that's going to come in and be an impact player right away. I mean, I think I said this a lot last year. I think Saints fans in particular, were spoiled based on the 2017 draft. I mean, that is just such an unlikely scenario that the draft plays out so well as it did for those guys' rookie year. When you have Lattimore, Ramczyk, Kamara, Marcus Williams, even Anzalone for the first few games, even Hendrickson had some bright spots. I mean, that's just, really like 1 in a million. I mean, I think the only other time the Saints had a draft class anywhere remotely as good as that was 2006, and I think, eventually we're going to be talking about those two. We're going to compare those two 10 years from now because they're probably going to have a bunch of 10-year players, but it just happens so infrequently. And I know last year a lot of people were like, well, why aren't our rookies as good as they were last year? And it's just like because they got super lucky, with all of those picks. And then this year it's going to be even worse because they don't have a 1st-round pick, they don't have a 3rd-round pick, they don't have a 4th-round pick. So there's really no projecting who they're going to get in the 2nd round. I agree that a defensive lineman or an offensive lineman might make sense, but at the same time, it's hard enough to rely on a 1st-round pick to have a, significant impact. Right. So certainly a 2nd-round pick, there's no guarantees.
Yeah, for sure. And I think defensive line is also one of the hardest positions to come in and be an impact player right away as a rookie. I think there are obviously exceptions to that. We saw Bradley Chubb come in and dominate this year with the Broncos, but a lot of the times those guys come in and they play really well right away. They're high-end 1st-round picks, or they're a freak of nature like Aaron Donald. I think if you're drafting defensive linemen, it's going to be for depth, and it's not going to be expecting those guys to come in and contribute in a huge, meaningful way right away. It's a tough position when you're coming in from going up against 18-year-olds to going up against grown, strong men. And I think, it's gonna be tough to if you have a certain number of positions on your team that you need to address, and you only have one pick in those first 4 rounds, it's like you almost feel like you gotta nail it, you know. But it's really hard to nail the 60th overall pick of the draft or 62nd, whatever it's going to be. I actually kind of want to throw a hypothetical out there.
Let's go.
All right, so let's say the Saints see somebody. I'm thinking of this because Bill Barnwell wrote something today, putting out like 5. Bill Barnwell for ESPN, putting out like 5 potential moves for the Saints, and he had them trading into the first round by trading next year's first round pick and the second round pick to draft somebody like Kyler Murray. So what I want to know is, would you be cool with the Saints continuing to kind of kick the can down the road and like maybe trade next year's first round pick to move up and get somebody they really like, knowing that Drew maybe has 1-2 years left, however many years he has left, and this is kind of your window? Would you be cool with that?
Personally, I would not be cool with that because this is a rare opportunity for me to go to a First Thursday Jazz Fest. Rare opportunity, that it exists in the first place, and also that it's the locals day and that the Saints don't have a first round pick. But I just don't think that's a smart way of going about business. I mean, I understand maybe the desire to, obviously get a first round quarterback and someone to develop for a year or 2 under Drew Brees. I just think that, this is the Saints' championship window, and I think all of their assets need to be sort of directed at improving this year's roster.
Yep.
And I think that is where you sort of question the trade for Teddy Bridgewater last year, in hindsight. I mean, obviously when they made the move, it made sense that they weren't ready to commit to Taysom Hill as their backup quarterback. They wanted someone with experience in case Drew Brees got hurt, sort of a, Eagles scenario where they, had Nick Foles backing up Carson Wentz, and then, obviously Foles led them to the Super Bowl. But I just think that, obviously now they wish they had that 3rd round pick because they didn't really need Bridgewater. And if you just keep giving up these assets for the future to help your present when ultimately that guy is not even helping you in the present, barring injury, I just don't think that that's a wise move. So, good hypothetical.
Intelligently responded to.
Thank you. Appreciate that. But before that happened, we were discussing defensive tackle, and Matthew Stanford asked, what is the biggest need, tight end or defensive tackle? To me, it's pretty close now. I'm actually going to say that it's not that close. I was just thinking about this before Luke's hypothetical. I think the Saints got away last year with having sort of a mediocre tight end group. Ben Watson obviously was not that productive, and his role sort of diminished as the year went on. Josh Hill is obviously a solid player, sort of a dynamic guy. And then I think, Dan Arnold is capable, and if you let him develop a little bit more, maybe he can sort of give you the production that you got out of Ben Watson. And then Garrett Griffin, obviously another sort of dynamic, blocking focus guy. But I just think that the offense was so good last year, even without, a go-to tight end threat, that I don't think they necessarily need one. I know we're used to seeing the Saints have that guy, whether it was Jimmy Graham, Jeremy Shockey, Watson, for a year in 2015. But I just think in the league right now, there are so few dominant tight ends, and having a dominant tight end doesn't necessarily spell success for your offense, and I think the Saints prove that throughout the year. Obviously, you'd like to have that threat, but I just don't think you can sort of pigeonhole, that as a need, as your top need, and I think defensive tackle, just based on, what they are going to be missing at the start of the year, I think that right now is probably the number one need that I see.
I would agree with that. I think if you're just looking at needs, like what needs to be addressed, they have to do something about defensive tackle, and they can get by with what they have at tight end, and maybe they have a mid-round flyer on a guy who turns out to be a pretty good player. I think they can get by with that. I do think it is critical that they add a better secondary option at receiver this year. Somebody to take some pressure off of Michael Thomas in the passing game.
Yeah.
If they feel that Traquan Smith can develop into that, or Keith Kirkwood, they feel Cam Meredith can come back and be a different player than he was from his knee injury, fine. But they need somebody to fill that role better than they had this year, because their offense was just so dependent on Mike Thomas being dominant. we looked up the numbers. Mike Thomas had more catches than the rest of the receivers on the Saints roster had targets combined.
Yeah.
Which is not good.
No.
And we saw teams just blanketing Mike with safety help over the top, just straight up double coverage. They need to have somebody there to take some heat off him.
Yeah, absolutely. And it could be a receiver. You could hope that Traquan Smith or Keith Kirkwood develop. I just think, fans need to be aware of the idea that the Saints have very few opportunities to significantly improve their roster this year. I think, obviously, we all know, as I said earlier, what Mickey Loomis is capable of with regards to the salary cap and, having these weird contracts with shell years. But, I mean, even he knows that you just can't keep kicking the can down the road every year. So, we're going to see. But, ultimately there are plenty of other teams that have a lot more cap space. And I think it's also important to remember that most good free agents never make it to the market because their team wants to keep them.
Right.
So, all of the lists that you see out there right now of pending free agents, a lot of the top guys at each position are not going to make it to the market. So the Saints are going to have an opportunity. So ultimately, they're going to be deciding between a lot of second-tier guys, and certainly those guys can help. But I just don't think, people should think, oh my God, they're going to get some all-pro tight end or wide receiver to come in and help the offense. Which leads me to my next question from Neil Adams, who asks, any truth to Antonio Brown having interest in joining the Saints? I don't know where you saw that. I just did a quick search on Twitter, and apparently NFL on Fox did a poll where fans voted that he should go to the Saints. So
that's a pretty dope Photoshop.
So maybe that's where you saw it. Who's wearing number 84 right now? Well, I guess it was Hooman.
Yeah.
Give it up. So, I mean, I don't know what the Saints could possibly trade to the Steelers in order to get him. I mean, I don't think they're going to give Antonio Brown up for a third-round pick. I doubt they would do it for...
They don't have a third-round pick.
Excuse me, a second-round pick. Sorry, it's so confusing, It's like one pick in the first 4 rounds. So we can keep it straight.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, Antonio Brown would, be amazing in the Saints offense. And Antonio Brown and Michael Thomas, I can't even imagine watching that. But
well, yeah, and then on top of that, you got to pay Antonio Brown.
Right.
You got to pay Antonio Brown.
Crazy
Antonio
idea.
Brown money.
Yeah.
So that's impossible. It's not going to happen. It is not going to happen. I hesitate to say impossible because anything is possible, except for that. That's not possible. No, it's not.
Please use the Kevin Garnett version of saying anything is possible from here on out, Luke. I know you're new to the show, but that's sort of something, that we have. Yeah, there we go. Someone actually tweeted at both of us the other day, and I had to sort of bite my tongue.
The Antonio Brown tweet?
Yeah. What was it?
They need an Antonio Brown caliber receiver opposite Mike Thomas. Unfortunately, there's only one Antonio Brown caliber receiver, and it's impossible for them to get him.
Well, it's really funny. I wanted to say something that the Saints should just go to the Antonio Brown tree and pick an Antonio Brown. And I'm really glad that I didn't tweet that snarky response. A, because that it wouldn't have been good for
self-control is good, Josh.
B, 5 minutes later, Antonio Brown put out the video with a little Uzi Vert thing, saying, now I do what I want, and basically saying that, thanks for everything in Pittsburgh. So good job by me, withholding that incredible joke.
It's restraint.
Caroline asks, can you see Loomis making some trades next month to net us some more early round draft picks this year? Certainly, I would think that, the Saints will try.
Yeah.
I just don't know how they go about doing it. I mean, in order to get more draft picks this year, they would either need to trade players or future draft picks. And certainly I do think, either of those options is possible because they are wanting to improve the roster this year. But as I said earlier, it's so hard to rely on rookies that there's no guarantee that, anyone, if you trade a future draft pick, it's going to have to be something worth more value than the current one. So you'd have to trade a first, next year's first and this year's third in order to get a late first round pick this year.
Right.
And that's just how the trade chart works. I mean, that's why, the Saints had to give up a second round pick to get the third round pick when they ultimately took Alvin Kamara. So I certainly could see them doing that. But like I said, no guarantees about rookies. I mean, look at, Marcus Davenport this year. I think that's why there was so much criticism when they made that trade, because they gave up 2 first-round picks for one guy. And, you know, as good as he was in the first half of the year, he dealt with an injury and some, you know, rookie struggles the second half of the year, as most rookies do. So I certainly think it's a possibility. In terms of players, I don't know who they could trade. I mean, Andrus Peat comes to mind.
Yeah, he's the only one I can think of, but I don't think. What are you going to get for Andrus Peat?
I know, because obviously, what's his? It's like $9.5 million, basically.
Yeah, 9.6.
Yeah, $9.6 million on his 5th-year option. So basically, you'd be trading a guy who is slightly overpaid, who's going into the last year of his deal. And those guys just don't have that much value. So, I mean, maybe you could get like a mid-round pick for Andrus Peat, but, I mean, is that really worth giving him up when you know what he can do on that offensive line when he's healthy?
Especially with the versatility he has.
Right, exactly.
There's a game this year he played, I think, 3 positions.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Especially knowing that Teron Armstead has never played a full 16-game season. And then, I mean, Patrick Robinson. Like, I'm just going down the line of guys that, you know, they might think that they could move on from, and it's just not that many, and that's why there are so few player trades in the NFL. Just because typically, if a team if a team is paying a guy, it's because they value him, you know, at a certain level compared to what other teams do, and it's so hard to get that return for, you know, what they see and when they signed him, because these are all such short-term deals for the most part. That, you know, when they sign players, these NFL teams have a vision for them, and typically that vision doesn't change after 1 year.
Right.
So, certainly possible, Caroline, but you know, we'll see. Matt Faust, who is a former classmate of our sports editor,
she's over here.
Jennifer, who is sitting right over here.
Hey,
she
Matt.
is helping us with the question. She says hello and happy Valentine's Day.
She did say happy Valentine's Day.
She didn't, but
He married my former college roommate.
Oh.
It's all good. Happy Valentine's Day.
Right.
Yeah, now she says happy. See, Luke, come on. You gotta get a little artistic, you know, what's it?
License?
Yes, that's the word.
I'm the word guy.
You have the best words. Matt asks, after all of that, Breeze reportedly missed the Pro Bowl due to injury. Is there any more information on that? Is this a legitimate injury that could have contributed to the passing game waning down the stretch? Seemed like you had something to say.
I think the injury he suffered was an injured.
A broken heart.
There you go, broken heart. Yeah. No,
Jennifer. God. Wow, perfect.
Why aren't you on screen?
I need a mic.
She does. All right. Jennifer said a broken heart, and I think that's it's a much. Maybe she's the word gal. That's way better than what I was about to say. Anyways, I think you see a couple of these guys missed the Pro Bowl because of the way the season ended. Honestly, I think there was zero interest in going and playing in an NFL exhibition when your season ended the way it did. I think the fact that Cam Jordan went, I think Cam is a different creature altogether. He just wants to play, but I think some of these guys just did not want to play in that, and that's just my personal read on things. But I don't think there was a significant injury that caused Drew to miss that game.
I was gonna say a bruised ego, not quite the same injury, but I'm no doctor. Although, actually, wait, hold on, I am the Love Doctor.
Dr. Love.
So I guess we gotta go back to that. My nurse maybe gave you a bad diagnosis.
Stop it.
Anyways, yeah. So I can't say for sure that Drew Brees was not suffering from an injury, but he was never listed on the injury report. And I saw him a few days after the game, during Super Bowl week, and he seemed fine. I think there are just a lot of players that skip the Pro Bowl just because they don't want to play, and I think that was the case with him. I imagine that was also the case with Michael Thomas, although Michael Thomas had been dealing with a little injury off and on this year, so maybe a little more likely that he was actually dealing with something, but certainly I think there's no reason to worry about Drew Brees.
No.
What else we got? Philip Wiebelt Sr. asks if Mark Ingram will re-sign with the Saints. Give me a percentage, Luke.
I will say 60-40 that he does.
I think that's pretty good, actually. I think I said earlier this year that it was like last year that it was like 30% that he would, just because, you think about, the likelihood, he could either, it just comes down to, you know, his desires, the Saints' desires, and other teams' desires.
Right.
You know, because Mark Ingram has said that he wants to be here, and the Saints obviously would like to keep him, but, you know, it comes back down to the salary cap issues that the Saints have, and then I think he's also going to have a little bit of a wake-up call, and there's going to be a little bit of an ego thing for him, too, because I think Mark Ingram is going to have to realize that the contract that he got previously, I believe it was 4 years for $16 million, so $4 million per year. If he can get that again, I think that would be great for him.
I think so.
Just based on the running back market, there are very few running backs that make more than $4 million per year right now, just because the market has soured. It's a passing league and all this stuff. You look at Le'Veon Bell, can't even get, you know, paid appropriately. But I mean, that's going to be, you know, a tough thing to handle because he's played his best football under that most recent contract, so it only makes sense that he gets a pay raise, but I just don't know for sure that's going to happen. And I think just because of the current market being as low as it is, I think that makes it more likely that the Saints re-sign him. So I'll go with that 60-40 number 2 because I think both sides want to strike a deal. The only question is if another team comes along and offers him more money and enough money to sway him, you know, to leave.
I think this could be like a slow play thing. Where the Saints want him back, but they want him back at their price, and they let him test the market, and you know if a team out there wants to pay Mark Ingram $5 million a year, $6 million a year on a 3-year contract or whatever, then the Saints let him walk. But if he goes out there and the market's kind of cool, like it has been for running backs, and there are like quite a few running backs out there in this market. A lot of them are in their mid-20s. Mark Ingram's going to be 30, I think, next December.
Yep.
So, that kind of plays against them. And if I think the Saints let this thing kind of draw out a little bit and try to get him back at their price. I can't imagine I think it would be a bad move for the Saints to offer him a low deal right off the bat.
Right.
I don't think you want to disrespect him, but I think you let him have a chance to make his money and then counter that if it's reasonable for you. But I do think they want him back, and Mark Ingram has made it clear that he wants to be back. They keep Alvin Kamara happy if he's here, and I think that's important too.
So there was a comment on here, just wanted to address real quickly. Matthew Harmon said he was glad Breeze and Thomas turned down the Pro Bowl. He just wishes that Kamara and Jordan had too. So I understand that, every Saints fan wants the Saints to, show how much they hate the league and, just a response to the no call. But at the same time, it'd be nice to get some money. Like, I think we all agree that, it's good to have money. I'm blanking on the exact number.
It is good to have money.
Okay. Every player on the winning team from the Pro Bowl got $64,000. So, look, I'm not turning down $64,000, and the losing team made $32,000. So just for showing up, you're guaranteed to get $32,000.
That's a rollie.
And look, I understand.
Roll X. Right?
You get a decent car for $32,000 or a really nice watch. I'd probably get a Patek Philippe, but who are we? Whatever. I just think that obviously if you're Drew Brees, you can afford to skip out on a paycheck like that, and Michael Thomas, with his contract coming up, probably can afford to do that too. But for most guys, that is a hefty amount of money just to show up for a week, do some charity events, and then do like a 50% effort game.
And like I said, I think especially for guys like Cam Jordan, he really takes pride in this sort of thing. I think when he was at the Pro Bowl, he posted a throwback video of his dad's highlights in the Pro Bowl. I think he enjoys that aspect of things.
Right.
I don't think Cam was definitely angry over what happened in the game. And he was displeased. Obviously, Mike Thomas was too. I think everybody saw his Twitter for a 2-week stretch. But some guys, I think just like the experience going out there and seeing all their friends from around the league participating in something like that, and and for some guys it just means more to them than others, I guess.
Yeah. Aaron asks, how likely is it honestly that the Saints look at Sue? What is seriously the percentage of interest? Let me say I don't want him. Thanks. By the way, if the Packers will take a 6th or 7th round pick for Jimmy Graham, he would take him as much as he loathes him. I saw a report that the Packers might cut Jimmy Graham, which would obviously make it, easier for the Saints to get him. But again, how much does he have left in the tank?
Yeah.
Is it worth paying, whatever he's going to need to address that position when you could address something else?
I think Jimmy Graham is not the Jimmy Graham that we last saw in a Saints uniform. I think just going out there would be getting the name and not the player that people expect. Sure, you could try to trade a late round draft pick and maybe have, he'd be a better receiving option than anything they currently have. But you're also, you're talking
He's
about...
32 years old. He's going to be 33 in November. It's tough to assume that he's going to help you. Now, if they cut him, he'll probably jump right to the top of the tight end market.
Well, I don't know. I think Jared Cook is probably the top of the tight end market right now.
He is right now. I'm saying if they cut Jimmy Graham, I think Jimmy Graham would probably... You think Jared Cook... You'd rather have Jared Cook than Jimmy Graham?
Yeah, I would.
Okay.
Jared Cook had a hell of a year last year. I think he had 2 years before, he had a really nice postseason stretch with Green Bay. I think he's probably the best receiving tight end in the market right now, even if Jimmy's out there.
I think I'd still have Jimmy Graham, but it's definitely...
Listen to Josh,
it's definitely close. No, it's definitely close.
Do.
It's definitely close. And then as for Sue, I'll say like 20%. I think I'm going to look up real quick just the cap space for certain teams, but I think, I'll say 20% just because there were those overtures last year, so those overtures could happen again this year, and the Saints, as we've discussed ad nauseum, definitely need help at defensive tackle. I just think that some other team is going to be able to pay him more, and it might just be the Rams again.
Yeah, I do think the salary thing is an important thing for Sue. He signed a 1-year deal with the Rams. I don't think he's doing that to set himself up to take another 1-year deal somewhere for not a lot of money.
Right. So look at this. The Rams right now have about $32 million in cap space, which is almost 3 times as much as the Saints. And for everyone who looked at the Rams last year and all of their moves, building their superstar team to get to the Super Bowl or whatever, they still have 3 times as much cap space as the Saints, just because they have been making these smart moves. And when you do try to build through free agency, you do it through short-term deals that don't hinder your cap space for years to come, which is what the Saints have been doing year after year after year.
Well, and the Saints are also paying Drew Brees too.
Yep.
Rams,
Drew Brees has the highest cap hit in the NFL this year, $33.5 million.
It's really tough when you're paying an elite quarterback money, and the Rams are paying Jared Goff on a rookie deal, which opens up a ton of money for them to use. And just like as we talk about these free agents, just keep in mind that in the next 2 years, the Saints are going to have to pay out a ton of money to keep some of these players around, and you can't. You've got to leave yourself some money to sign some of these guys. Otherwise, you're going to have to let them walk because you can't afford them.
So we'll see. I definitely think there will be conversations. Don't be surprised if there's reports that the Saints are interested in Sue, but I just think it's going to be unlikely that they sign him just because of their cap restrictions. We got 2 more questions here from Everett, who I believe asked a question earlier. Do you believe the Saints need to address their returner positions?
If they can, if they can get a guy late in the draft who's maybe specialized in special teams in college. You think back on Chicago. I think, did they sign Tariq Cohen after the draft? Was he an undrafted free agent?
No. I think it was like a 6th-round pick.
But you can find guys like that who you can take a flyer on, small college guys who end
4th-round pick.
Sorry, is that high?
Yeah.
Wow. He played at North Carolina A&T or something like that. So I just think you can find guys like that, guys who have maybe special ability, who don't have the prototypical NFL size or whatever it might be. And the Saints have shown willingness to work with guys like that. You see Tommy Lee Lewis on the roster, but Yeah, I don't think that's going to be something that's high on the priority list. I think they would probably like to not have Alvin Kamara back there returning kicks and punts. But yeah, I think that could be something they just kind of piece together.
Yeah, it could end up being like a domino effect. If Mark Ingram leaves, then certainly you're going to want to do everything possible to make sure that Kamara doesn't have to field any kickoffs. I mean, you would think that, with a year to train, maybe Taysom Hill could be better on kickoff returns, and maybe they'll give him a chance on punts, but he's so good at blocking, on punts that, they might not want to move him.
Well, and you also got to consider that there's a possibility Taysom's a number 2 quarterback next year. So that might limit how much he plays on special teams. I'm sure they'd still use him in the regular offense, but maybe he won't play 300 special team snaps again next year.
Right. So certainly I think that they need to address it, but whether they do or not is just going to come down to, the assets they have, and you can't just use that just with the limited resources they have. You can't just go out and get a return man. You could certainly get someone, who's either a receiver or a running back or a defensive back who has that ability, like Luke was saying, late in the draft as an opportunity, to find someone there. But I just think, it's going to be hard to all of a sudden, just find the next Dante Hall or something like that.
That would be dope.
That would be dope. The original X.
Yeah.
Although, shout out to Dez. Should we talk about Dez? We don't need to talk about Dez.
No, we wrote like 30 stories on him in his 2-day tenure with the Saints, so you can go back and read those in NOLA.com.
And we should have written more, because everyone loved Dez. Although I do have a buddy who has a white Dez Bryant.
Saints jersey?
The Color Rush.
Oh yeah, I have one too.
It looks pretty good.
I have a friend who got that too.
Last one from Tyler Marchand. Will the Saints sign Michael Thomas to a long-term deal? In the past, the Saints haven't paid Cooks or Colston, etc. I mean, they did pay Colston. I mean, Colston didn't go anywhere. I mean, they just, didn't have to pay him a top-of-the-market deal, which is what they're going to have to do with Michael Thomas. And we talked to Mickey Loomis about this, a few weeks ago at the Senior Bowl, and, someone pointed out to him, that they haven't always been willing to sign their offensive weapons. And he's like, well, doesn't Michael seem different? And I think we all agree that he does. And so the Saints are going to have to find a way to pay him. It's probably going to be a contract worth close to $100 million.
Yep.
And, as that's why we keep coming back to all these free agent deals, they're going to have to find a way to pay all of the guys that have been helping them the past 2 years. So Michael Thomas is right now at the top of the list because he can finally now negotiate a contract, although he doesn't have an agent yet, as far as I know. So, he's going to probably try to get that done this offseason because he's going into the last year of his deal. He probably wants some security. The Saints probably want a little security too. So I think he'll definitely be back. It's just a question of when and how much.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I agree with the fact that it's probably going to cost him in the $100 million range.
Yeah.
Odell Beckham set the market with a 5-year, $90 million deal. I think a couple months before that, Mike Evans signed a 5-year, $82 million deal. And yeah, that was last year. I think we're going to see probably Julio Jones sign an extension that gets up to near $100 million, if not more. You're just going to keep seeing those numbers rise. It's going to be somewhere in that realm.
So yeah, it's unfortunate timing for the Saints because there was a time when receivers were not, getting paid, as premium players. But that's sort of
days ago.
The ebbs and flows of the league. And on that note, we are going to be signing off. I'm Josh Katzenstein. He's Luke Johnson. Thanks for joining us on Dat Chat. And as the Love Doctor, I am signing off and wishing everyone a happy Valentine's Day. And we'll see you next week.